Action.
Okay. So now that you've organized your debt by lowest to highest balance, it should look like that. Is that how everybody has theirs? Yes? Okay.
I want interest rates.
This is how we make this work. Okay. Remember, we start with the small, so we have a minimum payment of $50. But what did we learn about making minimum payments? If we just made the minimum payment, what would happen to our debt? It just keeps going, right? And I believe what Elizabeth Warren said in the movie Maxed Out was, people are content on paying the minimum payment until the day they die. Because that's really the only way you can get out from underneath these things. Unless you decide to make a concerted effort to make sure that you want to get out of debt. So, these are our minimum payments. If we make these payments, it's going to take us a long time to get out of debt. Right? So if we're looking at $50 a year in a month for $1,000, right? 50 goes to 1,000 how many times? 20 times. So you're looking at about 20 months just to pay off that one bill.
I heard a lot of
So if you are serious about getting out of debt, what you're hoping to do is pay more than that minimum payment only on the first debt. So for the sake of argument, I said, look, I really want to get out of debt. So what I'm going to do is, instead of paying the minimum on this first one, I am going to up my payment by $50, and I'm going to pay $100 a month toward that debt. Okay? So I made the decision that I'm going to spend $50 more. All the other debt minimum payments stay the same. They don't change. Because we start with the first part of the snowball, right? So we're packing this in with a $100 a month payment. All right. So at $100 a month, it'll take how many months to pay that off? About 11 months. So we have about 11 months to pay it off. While we're paying that off, we're still making all of our other minimum payments. Why? Because what happens if we don't make a minimum payment? Excuse me?
Fees and interest rates.
Fees and higher interest rates, etc. So you don't want that to happen. So we're paying all our other minimum balances, but we've increased our $50 one to $100. Okay? After about 11 months, what we can do is we can strike this payment out because we paid it off, right? 11 months times 100 should pay off that debt. So then what we do is we take this $100, we roll it in some more snow, in this case money, with our next minimum payment.
That'd be awesome.
So you take 100 plus our next minimum payment, and it makes it 175. So now you have a payment of $175. Okay? Now you paid off basically 11 months, right? 11 months. So you basically cut that second debt, that MasterCard debt, in half while you paid off the first debt, correct? Right, 75 times 12 is about a little more than half of that. But there's some interest rate. So in theory, you could pay this off in just a couple of months, couldn't you? So within a year or a year and a couple of months, you've paid off 2 of your debts. Once you pay off that MasterCard, little strike through. So that's no longer there. What do you do next? You take that 175 and do what? Add it to the next minimum payment.
441.
And that becomes 441. So in just over a year, you've wiped out 2 of your debts. In the same time period, you've paid about $3,000 toward the other debt. So instead of having $11,000 there, you're probably down to about $8 grand. Now you're putting in almost $500 a month toward that. So you'll be able to pay that off in 4 or 5 months. When that's paid off, your car's no longer there. We add the $441 to the next minimum payment, which is what, Alexis? The next minimum payment. 104. 104 and 441 equal 545. And then when you pay off that student loan, you roll the 545 in with Tiffany, 134, and that gives you a monthly payment of $679. Do you see how that works? And so within a couple of years, we're completely debt-free. Okay? Student loans, by the way, are 10 to 15 years long. The car loan's about 3 years, right? Credit card, a lifetime. You don't pay it off. Okay? Now, there are some things you could do. You could, because the two student loans are pretty similar, but one has twice the interest rate. So you could, as you get to that point, you could flip and pay the one with the lower interest rates off, because now you're down to just these two loans. Okay? And these aren't stagnant either. If you could, you've got a raise, or you could, during that time period, increase more on the minimum payments. There's no rule that says you can't do that. This is just a simple way to figure out how to get through it. Yes, sir?
What happens if you get more debt on a credit card?
Well, you're not going to, because you've now had an emergency fund, and you paid your you've used your emergency fund to pay that potential debt off, right? And then you've replenished that emergency fund, so that doesn't happen. That's why you have to have that emergency fund, because life happens, and you're not going to get yourself stuck in it, because you're making a commitment to it. Now, again, it works, by the way. I did this. It works. Now, there may be a time where that new minimum payment, you can't make the whole thing, because it's your minimum payment, not theirs. So you may have to reduce it a month here or there because something came up. Your emergency fund, because you have to replenish that emergency fund. That's okay. But in the end, in about 50 months, right? In about 50 months, we just wiped out $35,000 worth of debt. That's pretty good. And that gives you an extra $680 of disposable income, money that you could put somewhere else, like building wealth. Excuse me?
Every month.
Every month. Wouldn't it be nice if you had an extra $700 a month to play with, to do something else with, as opposed to pay some sort of bill? So that's the concept here of what we're trying to do. So what I'm going to have you do now is sort of make a line underneath what you've written down, rewrite everything down the same way except for the minimum payments, the new minimum payments, the regular minimum payments you're going to put there. So the first three things are the same, all the way down. And what I'm going to have you do is go ahead and figure out on your own budget how much you could increase your minimum monthly payment by. So you could choose $20, $25, $150. You probably can't choose $200 because you probably don't have that much money, but somewhere in that vicinity, $75, $5, whatever it is, and then do your own snowball debt, unlike the one that I did, similar to the one that I did for you. Okay? So you've got the example above, rewrite it, do your own, and let's see how it comes out, because this is the point where we're going to find out whether people understand what we're doing or don't understand. And it's okay if you're struggling with this, and I'll deal with it then. I'll sit down with you and we'll figure it out.